She dropped her beads in the sand, so the girl cried. For 100 years the girl searched the sands. They might be in the ocean, not the sand, so the girl cried. For 100 years the girl searched the ocean. They might be in the mountains, not the ocean, so the girl cried. How many years will pass before the girl wonders if she really dropped them?
Welcome everybody to the Meakashi Tea Party podcast for Rokkenjima. I'm your host Aspirety, and joining me this week we have Naomi joining us for the first time.
Hello.
It's your first podcast. Hope it's not too scary.
It's pretty scary, but I think I'll be okay.
You can do it.
We also have joining us Pepe.
Hello again, everybody.
What podcasts have you been on, Pepe?
Onikashi and Tatarigoshi.
Oh, you're on Tatarigoshi as well, yeah.
Was I in Onikashi?
I think you were.
Anymore.
I think you
It's
were.
been so
Pepe
long.
was on Tataragoshi.
Yeah.
I was not in Watanagashi though.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening in the audience and pushing my Ren as the killer theory when that happened.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you're on Onikashi. We also have Karifean.
Nep.
Dating this podcast,
Go
I see.
nip yourself.
Pictoshark.
Some say that humanity's deepest fear is death, but it's actually bad audio.
That is true.
And once more we have VyseGolbez.
Hello, it's me again.
You've kind of become like the protagonist of these podcasts as it's gone on.
You are Keiichi.
Oh god, that means I'm going to die.
Yes, probably.
Hopefully you'll have some more competition though, because there's been some really good discussion on the forum for this particular chapter. I really did try to rally everybody to get together to discuss this chapter because it's a bit of a fan favorite, and I'm pretty happy with where we got with all the discussion. Just for some backtracking for anybody tuning in, maybe this is your first time hearing about us, so I'll just give a brief introduction. So, Rokkenjima is a community for O-Sense expansion fans, particularly we're focusing on When They Cry at the moment. And what we do is these events we call tea parties / book clubs, and in those we'll basically take a given chapter from one of these O-Sense expansion works and kind of like dissect it a bit, dig deep with our ideas of what's going on. Like, we always have people that are new to the series to give their honest speculations and theories, and then we'll have people that are old to the series to come back and like revisit these chapters and kind of come back with a new mindset, kind of like more of like a formal analysis and reflection on what the story kind of means to them. And in particular, now that we're up to Meakashi chapter 5 of Higurashi, we're entering the answer arcs, which means there's going to be a lot less theory and speculation and a lot more just general analysis, reflection, and gushing about this chapter. So
I think there'll be a lot of that.
There probably will be. I enjoyed reading this tremendously, and you may notice there's 6 people on for this podcast. I tried to keep it down to 5, but in the end I decided everyone here was necessary, so it's going to be a lot of talking over each other, so hopefully I can keep that under control. With that said, I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get too far into it, I'd just like to bring up our 30-second recap, which is our little addition to rein in the podcast. So I believe Pepe has a recap prepared for us today.
Oh dear. Do I have a recap?
Do you?
Because I think the timer has already started, actually.
Alright. Well, I'll start when I start, Picto. Alright. Welcome to Higurashi Chapter 3, Meakashi, where we meet Shion, who escapes from her terrorizing school back into Okinawa and meets the sweet, brave,
Or you don't have to hype him up
beautiful,
that much.
and innocent Satoshi. Oh my god, his eyes. But he disappears. She goes crazy and kills everyone else in the end.
God damn it, Pepe.
That was 24 seconds or 22 seconds.
Well, okay.
You
So
really
basically,
could've-
I think it sums up this chapter pretty well, though.
I think so too. Just
Local
spend your-
cute boy pats girl's head, kills his entire town.
Amen.
The deadliest head pat in history.
The headpat that could destroy the world.
The head
These
pat
sad parts
around
need to
the
be
world.
nerfed in the next patch.
Yeah,
or more like
seriously.
around a single village.
So, let's just dig into general impressions here. I'll pick someone out from the crowd. How did you find Meakashi, Karifean?
Meakashi is like my favorite of all the Higurashi arcs. Like, I'm a veteran. I've read all of Higurashi before, and Meakashi is still my favorite arc because Shion is fucking amazing, and I absolutely love the first-person view we get on this entire tale.
Like I was
It's
thinking
damn
how-
engaging.
Yeah, it is. I was thinking how like my experience with Higurashi is this is my first time reading the sound novel, but I've watched all the anime. I know it's kind of a big offense.
What is wrong with you?
How could you? There's
But,
no
like-
Higurashi anime.
I'll defend the
just-
Higurashi anime. It was actually like not terrible, but that
I should
given
watch
that,
it.
like the Meakashi adaptation, the anime covered all of the important scenes, except that you don't get Shion's internal narration very much, which kind of leaves out a lot of the experience because you find it a lot more difficult to empathize or sympathize with Shion's actions and kind of get in her headspace, which is kind of what Meakashi is all about.
I agree with that.
I suppose the anime was more this is what happened rather than
Yes.
this is why it happened.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And what happened is still pretty damn tragic, but you just don't get the same kind of attachment.
What do you
You
think
don't
of
get
this
the what
chapter?
scene.
What do you think of this chapter, Naomi?
Well, it's really no secret that Shion is my favorite character from the series, so I'm really, really biased. Coming
why I
back
got
to
you on
this
the podcast.
chapter, I found that it was a little harder to sympathize with her than it originally was for me when I first read it. I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago.
That's interesting.
I want to say that's mainly because coming back to this chapter, I have run into people who have had abuse issues at home and stuff. So seeing how much she absolutely hated Satoko was like, I understand how rough it is to like have a kid at home who can't defend themselves and keeps antagonizing their abuser, and someone has to protect them, someone has to do something about that because they're way too young to really process that they need to hold back.
Yeah.
And yeah, seeing Satoshi struggle with, I want to protect my little sister, but this is taking a toll on me, is something I've actually seen personally happen, so it felt a little more believable than I originally thought. Because when I originally read this chapter, everyone in my family has always been taught, put on your gas mask first before you help anybody else, but sometimes that's just not feasible.
Right.
Yeah, interesting
Anyways,
perspective there.
I do find her a very, very compelling character, even if I found her harder to sympathize with, and I did still enjoy my read overall. It's still my favorite arc.
Cool. Picto.
Meakashi was really good. Clearly its biggest contribution to the canon was adding a Keiichi sprite. Okay, in all seriousness, I really liked Meakashi. I really liked seeing, from the point of view, like, Keiichi's killing was more, like, calculated. And, like, he knew exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. So seeing, from chapter 3 I'm talking about, so seeing Shion's, like, side, like, a very, like killings of passion. Like, she just completely loses it and just decides to knock out Kimiyoshi that one time. And all that was very interesting. I really sympathize with Shion. Overall, it was really good. But there were no club games, so unfortunately that relegated it down quite a lot.
Yeah, there were no club games.
I am actually being slightly serious about that. I think just having, like, Shion, like, have, like, a cute development scene where she slips into school, like, it would have taken away the power of the one day she does slip into school as Mion early on. But I feel just having some more character building with Satoko, Satoshi, the boy, like, playing some sort of stupid board game would have been interesting. Even if it would have taken away from the uniqueness of that scene a little bit.
Who haven't I asked yet? Vice? What's your thoughts?
I liked Meakashi a lot. It's the first chapter that got a 5 out of 5 from me.
Nice.
Really?
That was mainly because the music improved from the last chapters. Well, a lot of people always mention that this is the chapter that Dai joined the club. It's also the chapter that ZTS joined the music team, so several big names have joined.
Yeah, like, I noticed that. Like, everyone hypes up Die, like, because he composed You, obviously. But there's a lot of composers that were joining since the expansion around this time. Kind of like, I guess you could say the Higurumi sound label, as it's come to be known now. Yeah, like, the production value of this chapter was quite a leap over past chapters.
Yeah,
obviously,
I believe Kai is when Ryukishi really began coming into his own with an identity for this series, because a lot of these composers that took place in Kai started at Meikashi because it was the first chapter in Kai.
Yeah.
Because at least before Kai, if I recall correctly, almost all of the tracks were royalty free, if not all of them.
Yeah.
I think it was all of them,
Yeah, so I guess, like, this is when Ryukishi started making his big splashes in the Dojin market, and all these composers are seeing Higurashi and, like, offering to join the project or something. Like, it's really cool to see, I guess, Ryukishi's success story unfold. Even though, decades later, he's still, like, a one-man team. Or, like, 3-man.
Still going to Comic-Cons, still releasing stuff.
One small thing I also appreciated in this chapter is that in the end, the police actually did figure most of the things out.
Yeah, it's nice.
Well, they were still confused. Like, they still weren't sure if it was actually, Mion or Shion, because it worked both ways.
They figure it out. They figure it out.
Did they?
Yeah, they check her fingerprints on the bodies, and they realize that they switched during the incident.
Oh, okay. I still remember they were reading the diary and they were still confused. I don't know.
I think she was just like, oh, wait, they swapped a childhood, this is so confusing. But, like, he figured it out. It was just, like, a pain in the ass to say, which is true. Like, when we say the name Shion, we actually mean someone who was born with the name Mion. So...
Oh my fucking god, we're not going into that. It's the worst.
We are calling her Shion.
So this is... So, actually, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's common convention to call her Shion, so that's what we're going to go with. Karifean, did you have something else you want to say?
Actually, I wanted to ask you, what did you think of this chapter, Aspe?
I really like it. I feel like going through Shion's headspace is, like, really valuable. I don't know, it's just, like, it's kind of like a really fascinating case study on the, ethics of killing and, like, how far we're willing to empathize with someone who does horrible acts. It's quite remarkable of Ryukishi to be able to create this character who, by all means, does atrocious, otherwise, like, typically unforgivable acts, and yet still frames it in an environment in which we can empathize with Shion and want her to be happy. You know what I mean? It's really...
I think that is in large contributed to the fact that she is the point of view character, and as they say, everyone is the hero of their own story.
That is true. And, like, but, the whole aspect of Shion never really, like, forgiving herself is such a big deal of this. It's kind of like she resigns herself to her fate, and while she wishes for redemption, she doesn't believe she deserves it, sort of thing. I just find that really fascinating, the psychology of a killer, That's my psychology.
Especially in a society that keeps most of that stuff low key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very, like, uncomfortable, and that's why I love this chapter. Overall, it's probably my least favorite answer arc, but that doesn't mean it's not the best arc yet, probably.
Jesus Christ, Aspie.
What did you
have
say
to
about
be
Mahjong Boy?
I'm just hyping up the rest of the answer arc because I think they're amazing.
No. Can we get back to the grave insult to Mahjong Boy?
Mahjong Boy, no.
Akasaka's pretty vague, but
Yeah, I miss him.
Pepe, what do you think of this chapter?
Well, I guess it was a real eye-opener, huh?
Can we talk about that?
Okay.
Counter Shadowform made this wonderful post about the meaning of the title Meakashi Hen, and they bring up this point of how one could interpret the meaning as, obviously like there's the idea of the audience opening their eyes to the answers, but there's also like the idea of gaining a second perspective as sort of like a mystery depth perception, where you can kind of like see things from two angles and sort of like opening our right eye, you could almost think of it like. I thought that was a really interesting interpretation.
Oh man, I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I think what it opened for my eyes, at least, was the shift in perspective from what this story is trying to make the reader see. In the first question arcs, I believe, at least, that Rikishi was trying to make the reader see, like, hey, there's a mystery going on. You should figure it out. What the hell's happening? But now he's shifted away from that, and I think we should, focus less on that and focus more on the characters and why they're doing it. What's their motivations? Because we're going to be getting more and more answers as the chapters come in. And I think it'll be a lot less figuring out what happened, because I assume he's not going to give us all the answers on a silver plate. But we're going to have to figure out more why it's happening, who's involved, what are they doing, what is motivating them, and so on.
Yep.
So I hope
that
this
is
chapter
the heart
opens
of the
that.
mystery, isn't it?
Right. The heart of the mystery. And I hope that this chapter opens the eyes for not just the characters, but the readers as well.
What's going in my notes?
Right.
Maybe we could make a claim that Shion's eyes were opened at the very last second when she realized where she went wrong.
Oh, Jesus Christ. And then
That
her
scene
eyes
kinda
were...
made me tear up.
And then her eyes were opened a little bit more when her head impacted the concrete.
No, I think
yeah,
they
I'll take
closed
that.
then.
Pick the why.
Alright.
Now, where do we go from here? That's the
The
question.
twins.
I
feel that
wanted
would
to
be good.
touch on at least briefly the similarities and the differences between the twins, because while they continuously assert that they are the quote-unquote same person, they're
That's not the
not.
case.
They really aren't.
Definitely not.
And that's kind of funny to see.
It
point
may
of view
that may have
character
been
be so
true
obviously
when
wrong.
they were really young and they hadn't really come into their own as people yet.
Fuck, this is interesting from a psychology and identity perspective. Fuck, like, the one line that really spoke to me was the whole line about, Shion claiming that they're both just the same person, like, from a identity perspective, like, they're basically, two people born from the same flesh, you could almost say. And that, why do we have to be in different bodies? Why can't we just be together and experience the same things? And it's like she laments that fact. She laments that she can't share in Mion's experiences and, share that burden. And it's just, it's really interesting. And then you have the whole issue of how, like, they've split up for how many years because she's been on this boarding school, and then their identities diverge in different directions and they become very different people. And it really illustrates how environment can impact someone's development.
I really can't say that I know anyone who's gone through that, but I do know that, like, if you're in an isolated place for a long, extended period of time away from people who, like, you might have known them really well, but when you come back, it's gonna be like talking to a stranger.
Yeah.
And I feel that a lot when she comes back from the boarding school and really talks to Mion, and they have their first clash of ideals. And she's just kind of like, who are you? You're not...
That,
I mean, like,
that was
you
her
know,
first reaction.
it's like that. There's that sense of familiarity because when Shion asked Kasai about Mion, he's like, "Yeah, she's still the same as always, as far as I can tell." And on a surface level, that's true. Like when they're just like shooting the shit, like they're still the best friends they always were. But when you really dig deep on their fundamental values, you can see there's a dramatic contrast because of how Audio's been kind of indoctrinating Mion into becoming the successor, and that's kind of caused a huge rift. Whereas Shion's kind of gained this rebellious streak because of how she was kind of like forced to escape from the school and all that.
It might also be kind of like how, to use a metaphorical example, if you see someone every day, you're not going to notice that they're growing taller, but if you bring in someone who's been away for a couple years, it's going to be like, oh, you've gotten so tall.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and that
I get that every day anyway.
Jesus. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're so tall.
That might be the case for Kasai, in that he didn't notice the gradual change because he saw Mion a lot, or heard about her a lot.
Mm-hmm. That is true, that's true. So Kasai wouldn't be able to make a judgment like that, because he wouldn't have noticed any real differences.
I do also want to bring up, though, that even before they got separated, Shion and Mion weren't really the same person, because as we later find out through Shion's monologue, she actually made a distinction between the two of them, even back in the day. Like, back when she was still Mion, she saw herself as Mion, and Shion as... Holy shit, this is confusing.
Yes.
Well, she saw herself as the older sibling and everything that came with it, and she was letting her younger sister be her.
Mm.
That's the way she saw it. She didn't see each other as the same person.
I suppose.
And is that because of them, or is that because of the Sonozaki family?
I think it's because of the Sonozaki family, because I think at the point that she became Shion, then she was the one who started to push the fact that, hey, we're the same person, instead of trying to think that, oh, I'm Mion and she's Shion.
And I guess Mion went along with it just out of guilt.
It seems like Mion in
Please
general...
tell me she's forgotten the thing. Please tell me she's forgotten the thing.
It seems like Mion in general is kind of... The contrast between the Mion acts really outgoing, but she's actually kind of meek, and Shion acts like a meek little proper lady, but she's actually really impulsive, really emotional, and kind of a manipulative bitch.
Indeed.
That is actually pretty interesting, because
the most relatable
that
thing
mirrors
about
something that Renna said way back in Watanagashi, that both are different and they appear from the outside.
Vyse shocking us with his photographic memory, stroke notes.
I don't want to get stuck on this point too long, because we do have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, fair enough.
But, I don't know, did you have any thoughts on the specific conflict of the individual versus the collective? Kind of like differing political views there.
I personally have to agree with Shion that I do not think the collective is as important as the individual in this particular situation.
Yeah.
But when you bring in stuff like tradition and religion and how deeply rooted some people are in it because of how they grew up, where they grew up, who raised them, etc., etc., when you bring in convictions that are that strong, you're not going to change them overnight.
Yeah.
And Mion, having been around this kind of thing, having been taken into, I guess, this world, this way of thinking, hasn't really given much thought as to how different she might think from someone who hasn't been around it at all, has actively been kept away from it because they don't want her poisoning the family with her, twinniness, I guess.
Twinniness?
That's not a word, but let's just pretend it's a word for now.
Now, there's a lot we can talk about here, but I really want to focus on the Sonozaki family as a structure. It's really fascinating how many twists and turns this arc takes us through in exploring the role the Sonozaki family plays in everything. I would say it's one of the primary focuses of the chapter, actually. And especially with regards to Higurashi and Hinamizawa as a whole. We look at this family a lot. And we go through points of, like, hating them to maybe empathizing with them. And I just wanted to get everyone's, like, see where everyone's at. Show of hands, who hates the Sonozaki family and wants them to just get destroyed?
You're
I
not gonna
can't
get
say
any
I
hands,
do.
Asper.
But there
I
are a
think
hell of a lot of
the
problems with them.
individual. I don't have a problem with any of the individual people. I just think what they form as a group is kind of horrifying in many ways.
Yeah, that's basically my stance.
I mean, the problem is that I don't really hate the Sonozaki family. I just want to glass the entire village. But that's a matter for another time.
But
The system
Why
of the
would you
curse,
do it?
etc. If that even is a thing, was very
How will you
fascinating to me when I was
protect
reading
the
about it.
Zawa?
It's really fascinating to see all these logical leaps that Shion makes.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah,
going,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
no, don't do that.
Yeah, is the whole village gonna kill me?
When I was reading it, it was very compelling. I mean, like, if you take evidence of, like, the council that she was part of, where, like, she brings up that they snuck into the warehouse and everyone's like, off with their heads! It's just like, it really leads into the curse theory very well.
I want to call attention to the tip at the very end. I believe it was Disowned, where Shion talks to her mother about her relationship with her grandmother.
Yeah,
and her mother basically says, oh, it's mostly an act. We're actually on pretty good terms. She just has to seem like she's a jerk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
like,
that
I think
makes
that's
me...
the same for basically everyone.
And yeah, in combination with how Kimiyoshi stopped being so aggressive after the meeting, it makes you wonder how much of all of the old people acting really heartless and really indoctrinated is an act because they think they need to be.
I mean, like, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling
I had the
prophecy.
similar thought there.
I mean, there's a lot of...
But his hatred for Satoshi wasn't an act.
Vice,
Can't
you
discount that.
Yeah, that's true.
Vice, you go.
Was it really not an act?
No, I actually... You can't say that with too much certainty at this point.
That's the fundamental question, isn't it? You know, what was an act and what was real? But I really do buy into the idea that this is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where this the curse and all of the influence of the Sonozaki family has made it clear that the village needs to act as a unified will. Regardless of whoever is perpetuating that will, maybe it's nobody. Maybe everyone is collectively perpetuating this idea that they need to ostracize others. It's kind of like an ingrained idea since the days of the dam. And it's kind of like, if you go against the grain, you might suffer consequences. So everyone buys into this idea that they need to, rise up against invaders and act out the will of Ayashiro.
We fall back to the topic of the individual versus the collective.
In this case, this is a large group of people that all prioritize the collective, perhaps to their own detriment. If there was like some sort of force there to kind of wake them up and make them realize that they're all just kind of like going, like they're all feeding each other's paranoia, you could say, then maybe none of this would happen. I'm not saying that the Sonozaki family as a system doesn't have powerful influence. Like, at least from an economic standpoint, and they kind of demonstrated that they had a big involvement in the original dam, protest. But I get the impression that everything after the dam was just kind of like a process that couldn't be stopped. It was like a boulder that had been pushed off the mountain, and even after it busted through the dam project, it kept rolling, and no one could stop it at that point. It just kept gaining momentum.
I always felt like Audio was in the perfect position to actually do something about it. She just... I don't know.
They could have done something about it, but I think it was also to their own advantage, like having everyone scared of the curse, even if they weren't the ones doing it.
Yeah.
But you're saying that, like, the fear of ostracization, all that, is just a boulder that's still rolling. But we do all agree that the killings is probably, like, just one person, right?
The curse killings.
I don't necessarily agree, but okay.
This is where the big question is still, like, the elephant in the room. Like, who's actually doing the killing?
If the curse killings is just as a result of a system and, like, people deciding to do the killings, it would be comparatively easy to thwart compared to someone actively trying to kill people and trying to hide the fact that they are doing it in a major way. Like, you could just... Like, because it's just, like, a general idea of let's kill this person, you could just... Like, we're going back to the stupid time loop theory. Rika could just distract the person who ended up being the person who was going to do the killing and say she needs their help to do something.
Right.
And could very easily thwart things that way.
Exactly.
So it seems like it's more of like a focused will trying to do it, more than a general sort of thing, because otherwise it would be way too easy to mess up.
Isn't that kind of exactly the other way around?
If it were a focused will, wouldn't you be able to find out? Especially if it was a time loop.
If you're under the impression that the collective will make sure that no evidence will show up and no crime will happen, then you will be very sloppy in your methods, and you will be comparatively easy to thwart, in my opinion.
But then, if you are thwarted, then the next person is waiting right round the corner.
But there isn't enough divergence between all the arcs. Remember, if we're going for the time loop theory, then Rika loops back to the start every time. Like, to the Amakusa point.
Asakusa.
Before any of the killings occur.
Right.
And yet there is not many changes between the arcs. There's no like, oh, the fourth killing didn't happen.
Okay, we're getting into something interesting here, and I was hoping you would bring this up, because, like, regardless of whether you buy into the time travel theory or not, we need to start thinking about the implications of the differences between these arcs, right? We've already demonstrated that Watsunagashi and Meakashi aren't the same order of events. It is very similar, but there are some slight differences. The one thing that's going to be the most noticeable is Keiichi coming to save Shion from the motorbike incident instead of the other way around. Like, that's an obvious discrepancy there. We also have, like... maybe I won't talk about that. Maybe I can let you figure that out on your own. But there's some other discrepancies. And so we need to think about why that's the case, right? One interpretation you could go with, this was kind of like something which was brought up in the Yumineko podcast back then, was the Everett's interpretation of quantum mechanics, multiple worlds, many worlds interpretation. And so if we're going by that, then we're thinking that there's different worlds, then maybe there's like... If it's not random, then there's different causes for things happening. Like, we have like the whole doll incident that ends up happening in these worlds, which kind of sets in motion the chain of events, which causes Mion to get sad and complain to Shion, which kind of like rekindles her feelings for Satoshi, which kind of ends up bringing everything to a head. That's kind of like thought to be the trigger of this chapter. But then there's some slight variations, and it's like, why do some things happen in every chapter and why do they not in other chapters? Why do other things only happen in some chapters? For example, the curse happens every time, but it's always the same.
Because the trigger wasn't changed, and we still don't know what that trigger is. That's what I've been saying since way back when.
Okay.
It's like a game of tragedy, Looper.
Minor discrepancies can actually be relatively easily explained, specifically like the motorbike thing.
Right.
So we already said that... Yeah, shut up. Rip Bike-kun. So, we already said that we think that under the stupid time loop theory, that's its name, by the way.
Stupid time loop theory, TM.
Stupid. Yeah. We're saying that Rika remembers a lot more things, and everyone else is remembering fragments. Like, Keiichi is much more familiar with Satoshi's name than he should be in Chapter 3.
Yes, that was another thing we honed in on.
So, basically, Keiichi didn't knock down the motorbikes this time, or whatever he did in Chapter 2, because he has that vague fragment of memory of, I should be careful here.
It's an interesting theory.
Or alternatively, because we don't know which one comes first, if this one is the one that comes first, then Shion knocked over the motorbikes. And then she remembers, oh shit, I shouldn't spin around like this here this time.
I shouldn't be an idiot.
Interesting. Yeah.
However, this does create a discrepancy, and I just realized it creates a discrepancy.
I have to say, if Shion had that instinct that goes, hey, maybe I shouldn't be an idiot, I'm not sure this arc would have happened.
You can't fight
Wow.
the feelings,
Damn.
even if she did have that discrepancy.
Because, like, some people have this thing that ticks in their brain that goes, maybe I shouldn't follow this random impulse that might lead to something bad. Shion doesn't seem to have that.
Well,
That's why
I have a
empathize with her
question.
so strongly.
I have a question in regards to this stupid time loop theory, TM. If that were the case and Shion is experiencing it for the first time, who's to say that Wata Nagashi wasn't actually done by Mion instead of Shion? What if Shion was
there's an
innocent the
interesting
whole time?
theory.
If this is a whole different time loop from Wata Nagashi.
Because there is no decent way that Ryokishi could present us with that revelation in later chapters.
I don't give a
would
shit.
say that the fact that we become aware that Mion is a fundamentally nice person
Okay.
isn't horribly
contradicts her
impulsive.
killing things. Actually,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
kind of
have-
can't see Mion as capable of this anymore.
I have a topic
Like, there
I
are
want
so
to bring
many,
up.
not paragraphs, but there are so many parts in this arc where Shion basically goes, oh yeah, my sister is not capable of being mean. Because she's weak. And I don't necessarily think that just because she's weak, she's not capable of being mean, but...
That's very
That's
good,
right.
Naomi.
But I just had one conspiracy theory to lay on you guys. What
Oh,
if
no.
in Wata
Oh, God.
Nagashi, Mion and Shion didn't swap in childhood, and so it was a different culprit all along?
Oh god, the fuck that.
Asperity, I can't handle this, I gotta leave.
Jesus Christ.
The conspiracy theories are too strong, I gotta go.
But like, you know that like the person we know as Shion would have actually been Mion, but she'd have the same development as the Shion we know. So the Mion would go to the boarding school, she'd go start rebelling against her family, and she'd commit all the murders.
And therefore, the minor differences explain why she was the one who knocked over the bikes, or not,
Yeah.
for the second time. My god, he found it.
You cannot deny it.
You've blown my mind, and
I'm
well,
lost.
first, I gotta bring this up. Being fundamentally different people, would the events of the boarding school affect them the same way?
They were very similar.
They're
up to that
identical
point in their
twins.
life,
They
though.
have the same genes.
They have the same genes, and they had very similar life experiences because they switched very often.
I know,
And they still had a
but we've
lot of
already
formative
touched upon the
years
fact.
after that point.
But we've already touched upon the fact that Mion, even in childhood, was meek and a lot more considerate of others than Shion was.
Then why don't we
So-
go back even further and say that the child that was born first was different in the different timelines?
Oh God!
Hey.
Fucking god, Aspie.
Stop moving! Stop moving the goalposts! You have
I'm
to
sorry.
stop.
I'm sorry. This wild ride has to stop.
Actually,
But I just want to bring up this like kind of thinking about alternate universes and stuff is kind of interesting because like I put this to you. We've talked about how like random like changes can account for the differences in the world, but if the curses were really part of such a vague system of people randomly following instructions from Oreo and just maybe acting on it, maybe not. If it was such like a system with so many random variables, why would it happen again and again the same time in every world?
Yeah,
That's
that's another point.
That's interesting to me. Now then,
It
that's
seems
all
like
I wanted to say
someone
on that.
really wants to do it.
Mm,
Also, I
it's
still
interesting.
totally think that it's completely true and the second death was an accident.
Yeah.
what?
It's just like if it's an accident, it just seems odd to me that would happen in every world. But yeah, it depends on your interpretation.
Yeah.
Of course, assuming this is a multi-world thing.
We touched upon a bit earlier the morality of murders and how far you can sympathize with a killer. I was
Yeah.
going to personally ask if you think who, if any of the characters who were killed in this arc deserve to die.
Nobody deserves to die.
I mean, that's your
Well,
Yeah.
obviously, Oreo deserved to die because she had such a weak body. Eugenics. I can't make this joke last any longer, I'm sorry.
So please.
Let's just say none of them deserve to be killed.
I think we can all agree that Tepe deserved to die from chapter 3.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
I
Seta goes on to.
do.
We would have killed him in that situation. You can put us on the file now.
Poor random Yakuza
Secret
dudes
Services,
off-screen.
keep us in mind.
I was going to say that I think the only character in this chapter that I really think was irredeemable to the point of either deserving, like, life incarceration or death was Satoshi's aunt.
What about Shion herself
But, I mean, what about Shion?
for the edgy choice?
She basically went cray-cray.
She basically went cray-cray, but the thing is she's also portrayed in a lot more of a sympathetic light, at least at the beginning, than
But-
I beat children and scream at them because I want their parents' money.
I
But are
can
you
sympathize
sure that
with
was her
Shion.
motivation?
I can sympathize with Shion, but I still think she deserved death. Honestly,
I
at
can kind of
least,
agree
like-
with that, to be quite
or
honest.
at least like life incarceration, because it's just
Yeah.
I think that
How the
she
fuck
I
do
didn't
you
don't
come
think
back
deserve
she
to die.
deserved it.
She deserved to have a very long time contemplating her crimes, and she was lucky to slip off the edge there.
There we go.
honestly, like, I feel
Death
like
would
death
have
would
been
have
too
been a
kind of
relief for
punishment.
her.
I have to wonder what's harsher, like, murdering that many people and being forced to live with that, or murdering that
Yeah,
many people
exactly.
and killing yourself.
Exactly.
Well, we can go into my deep moral beliefs that every life has value, and that
Right.
it would have been better for her to live on because she might be able to turn her life around. But that's boring, and we're supposed to talk about Higurashi.
Yeah, we
I
are
am very
getting a bit.
anti-suicide.
I don't think she deserved to die, though I also don't think she had a future at that point anymore.
Yeah,
I think
given that she killed the head of a pretty prolific family with strong ties to the Yakuza.
I think she had a future as disappearing and being mentally conditioned and becoming a hitman.
Jesus Christ.
Right.
Can we have that spin-off? The spin-offs have already got really
Picto.
bad. Can we just like
Picto.
have
Come on.
Can't
Can we
Can't
like
we just
remove
have-
Picto from the room for a second?
we just have the theory where she just disappears and then finds Satoshi and they live a happy life? I mean, doesn't that exist? No. Okay. Fine.
It turns
I'll
out
just
it's
put in a
Satoshi.
vote for the wonderful future we see at the end.
Yeah, I would love that.
Future, present.
I need
Higurashi, it's
an
a
entire
wonderful-
chapter dedicated to that.
Where the wonderful future where Shion does not abide by the school's dress code.
Oh man.
Yes.
I just
There
think
is
there's
no
something
place.
really symbolic about how the chapter starts with her escaping from a strict Christian boarding school. It just really like hammers in how much Shion is kind of like going against the order, the flow, and how like, you know, it's almost like kind of her first step into a sort of an immoral life, I guess you could say.
I mean, going against the order is kind of the whole theme of this chapter.
No, I'm never going to get a chance to bring this up. I'm never going to chance to bring
just
this up,
bring it up.
again.
Just do it.
So, Kasai is great. I fucking love Kasai. He's like my favorite adult in
Aw,
this
man.
series, and I feel so
about-
like
Kasai
he's
is
just like
absolutely
God.
wonderful.
he's just like you can you can tell he's like got a Yakuza background, like probably still involved in the Yakuza, but he's kind of like that. He's like really like sort of got that real gentle feel to him. Like he's got this real sentimental soft spot for Shion, and it's just like you can tell he's a nice guy. He's just like been through some shit and seen some shit, but like he's really like trying to do the right thing by people.
He's like that
it just-
really scary looking uncle you have who always lets you have more candy than your parents want you to.
I don't know, like
He's
he's
very
scary
much
Shion
looking.
versus
also a
X-rays?
father figure for Shion.
Yeah, he just feels like a really nice guy, but like I wouldn't want to make an enemy of him.
Hey Aspie, chat says you're Yakuza. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I am Yakuza. Thanks for noticing.
Okay, chat.
Why
got
is
your
your
answer.
little pinky still there?
All right, chat. You have the Ryuga, whatever the hell it's called, franchise. You have Aspie's profile picture. You have half an hour.
Good job.
So yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about Kasai. I just think he's great, and I would like to see more of him. Speaking of like that sort of dynamic, we also have like with the kind of like interesting thing about Oreo is how much do we believe she's a terrible person? Because like I feel like the chapter is really trying to hammer this idea that Oreo is just kind of like she was born into her situation, and it's almost like an exact parallel of the life that Mion is living right now. Just kind of like she has to put on this face of a strong leader who will continue to enact these, you know, these rituals in order to maintain the order and their influence, even if she doesn't personally believe in them herself. The whole point about like her ripping out her own fingernails over stuff, and like how she actually let Shion live when she was pressured to kill her. It really paints this picture of Oreo as maybe not so evil as we would once thought.
I wonder if they're trying to basically say Oreo is what would happen to Mion far, far in the future.
Exactly. I feel like they're following the exact same path, and it makes me empathize with this bitch, because like early in the story I was like, yeah, you can fucking kill her. Just fucking do it.
All you can really hope for is that some kind of radical change happens either during Mion's time or because of Mion, and that sets her off of wherever this leads, because it's nowhere good.
Well, you know, she has Keiichi this time. Maybe Best Boy can help her out.
The power of the boy.
One thing about Oreo.
Shonen.
The power of long auto-scroll rants about school uniforms.
Picto, Vice is trying to say something.
One thing about Oreo and how she acts, and really the entire Sonozaki family that I see as the main problem, is that no one really realizes that a child probably isn't really able to comprehend that duality exists. That duality between that most of that really cold acting is actually just acting.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But I also think that a huge problem with the Sonozaki family in general is that in sticking to these old traditions in a more modern time, they're putting their kids into a world where other kids get to be kids, but they're not allowed to.
Right. I think
and then of course it puts a lot more into perspective how what Mion's doing with her friends at school is so important, because she's like really desperate to maintain those fun memories, and like she doesn't want to give that up, and she wants to kind of like, you know, live her childhood like she's meant to, even though when she goes home it's a completely different life.
I think fundamentally she's a nice person, and we can test that. It's just that she's very conservative about their own ways. Even if you can,
I definitely criticize her.
I mean, yeah, even if you say that she agrees, just because it's tradition, and she doesn't actually agree with it, there are still some points where she's pushy about tradition. I mean, she could make exceptions because she.
My criticism is that she could probably change things if she really wanted to.
Yeah, exactly.
But then we look back to the entirety of people don't change things because they're really scared that they're gonna die.
Yeah, and then there's also like, you know, there's many benefits of keeping up this facade, but frig, I wish she would have like investigated the curses a bit more, but apparently she didn't find anything. So if we believe what Mion is saying, like this is all hinging on believing what Mion is saying. Do we believe what Mion is saying? Do we doubt
I made
this?
a wonderful post about that on the forum, Aspie.
I personally do not think Mion has the stones to lie to someone while hanging over a bottomless death drop.
Right.
I don't have the stones to do that. I don't think she has the stones to do that. I don't think most people have the stones to do that.
Right.
And also from a sheer narrative perspective, it isn't going to be a lie, because it's treated as a big revelation at the end of a section of the story. Like, it's almost like a giant narrative dick move to pull it back later.
Would you put it past him?
I would not.
Believe in Ryukishi, Pepe. Protect the Ryukishi in your heart.
Yeah, protect the Ryukishi in your heart.
The Ryukishi in my heart is pretty creepy, but okay.
Okay, so now,
you have to protect
so now
him
we're going
anyways.
to. So now we're going to break.
Sarah.
We're going to break into our worst the worst thing in this entire podcast.
Yes.
So, it's time for the Mion culprit theory.
Oh
Sure.
dear God.
Mion is aware of the time loop and knows that Rika is looping back over and over again, and is conducting the killings so she can keep playing the club games and keep having her alright-ish childhood life.
So I've got to ask you, is she an alien too, or is that too far-fetched?
She conducted all the killings by accident the first time, and then she realised the time loop was happening.
So
I'm gonna
she just
stop
wants
now.
to. She doesn't want to grow up.
She just wants her time to stop. Halt, O time, for thou art fair. I managed to slip a DSEDA shill into this podcast, and I am very proud of that.
If that were true, Picto, how old would Mion actually be by now? Is calling her an old man actually justified?
That was a hint! She was dropping a hint!
God fucking damn!
She was telling us all along and we didn't realize. The truth has been hiding in plain sight.
Only she knows she's an old man.
Is this better than the Keiichi mom theory? That's the real question.
Keiichi!
So, seeing Keiichi without Keiichi's thoughts is a very different experience.
Honestly, I thought it was fantastic how he appeared. Like,
I know, right?
That's prime Keiichi right there. This is just... He totally changes the mood of any situation he's in. He becomes the main character of any given scene. Even if it's fucking stupid. He will always, like, drag people's attention to him. He's the perfect sort of member to gather people around him and, like, get people looking in his direction. And we see this again and again through the chapters of how he's, like, influencing, like, the baseball game. How he's, like, turning the tables on these club activities and getting everybody in the class excited just because Keiichi's getting involved.
I mean,
it really, like...
I don't know if it's
setter.
just a Japan thing, but like since I live in Los Angeles, if I saw somebody being loud and stupid in the street, I'd probably just walk by them. It happens all the time.
I think it's a Japan thing.
Yeah, probably. Because
a Japan thing. Rural Japan.
Also, Shion is
How could
totally
Shion not
into
fall in love with
Keiichi.
Keiichi if he's so darling?
She
But
is
he's-
totally falling for him. She just
No.
doesn't
Shion
want
just
to
has
admit
bad
it,
taste.
and she
Shion
blocks
just has
it out
horrible
with her
taste.
old love for
Yeah,
Satoshi
okay.
immediately.
Good. I'm glad we're getting on
Is
this.
it?
'Cause, like,
Really?
yes, because, like, the moment that Keiichi pats her head, she's like, no, I'm not enjoying this, I'm not. And then she starts bringing up her thoughts of Satoshi. And it's like, oh god, Satoshi flashbacks, PTSD. And it's just kind of like a trigger for her. And it's just like...
Have you ever had a PTSD flashback because someone patted you on the head?
I mean, she tries to accept it. She tries to maybe fall.
No, but then she's
She
like, she's always saying, like,
externally
I see
tries?
why Mion likes him. And she's just like...
It's
she
never,
just...
I like him a bit. It's always, I see why Mion likes him a bit.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, she's refusing to acknowledge that she feels that way. She's just pushing it onto Mion because I have my Satoshi. It's that cross I'm bearing that I don't ever want to forget the impact Satoshi had on my life. How dare I ever feel something for anybody else? And she's
That's
always
exactly
denied.
how I took it as well.
personally disagree.
Oh, knock us out.
Well, I still think that what she's looking for and, well, what she wants is something that she finds in Satoshi and definitely not in Keiichi. Because I think for a point that there was a point in which she does, kind of get over Satoshi. This was maybe before Mion confesses about teddy bear.
All right.
Right. And at
Not
that
a
point,
teddy
she
bear,
does...
by the way.
What? Oh, a doll. I'm sorry. Satoshi was the one with the teddy bear.
Inanimate,
Oh, yeah.
fluffy objects. Anyways, continue.
Anyway, so at that point, she does interact with Keiichi and she does try to, have fun with him. But she realizes that inherently, this isn't the kind of warmth that she's seeking. This isn't the kind of companionship that she wants. Because fundamentally, Keiichi and Satoshi are different people, no matter how much the previous chapters tried to point that out to us.
Well, yeah, but
Right.
there's also the fact that Shion is a love-starved puppy.
I would definitely wouldn't say that she's I mean, she's a Satoshi-starved puppy, but I don't think she's a
I would say that I kind of agree with the fact that, yeah, she probably is still looking for someone to latch onto, but I don't think she would go after Keiichi, because, like Pepe said, Keiichi and Satoshi are fundamentally different. Satoshi is a much ditzier, much gentler person. And while Keiichi being, like, really loud and really boisterous appeals to Mion, it seems like Shion doesn't really like it.
No, she does not. Exactly.
I do think she's into him, but I don't think in that scene in particular it's really necessary. Like, I think in that scene in particular she was just primarily afraid of getting over Satoshi in general.
Yeah, I do think that contributes to it.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like Shion was given almost a gift-wrapped, amazing, perfect case person for getting over Satoshi. But, like, because he's different enough from Satoshi that, like, she could get over all of that stuff. But because of her circumstances, the entire thing fell flat and she ended up torturing him in her basement.
I mean,
Right, so-
I also want to
I hate
add...
it when that happens.
Oh, god damn it, what did I want to add? Fuck. I also want to add that even if she was into Keiichi, I don't think she would have been able to go, okay, well, sis, I'm gonna steal your boyfriend. Cause, like, she kind of, like, toes the line of doing that, but it seems like until it gets really bad, she doesn't seriously consider it. You're just like, there's the thought of, oh, I could make my sister be upset by doing this, that, and the other thing, and she's like, nah, that's a little bit too over the line, I'm not gonna do that.
Well,
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe I should
Not-
like
not
revise what
her-
I'm saying a little bit. I'm
her-
not saying that Shion ever fell head over heels for Keiichi, but she felt something, and that something
Yeah, no, I agree with
repulsed
that.
her. You know, it
Well,
repulsed her on a very fundamental level, enough for her to rekindle her internal hatred and her hatred towards the town. Just kind of just like fueled everything, I think.
Yeah.
And like, you could definitely say that the doll was kind of the tipping point for that.
Yeah.
Well, I think what repulsed her is the fact that there's this kind of guy in Hinamizawa, and he's not doing anything about why everything else is happening. Because I still think that she sees a bit of herself in Keiichi. And
You're ignoring the head pats. The
Oh.
power of head
I-
pats.
I
can
need,
the
I
go-
need to interject after this because I just
the head
remembered what I was
pats
gonna say.
are very important. I don't think Keiichi's head pats are as good as Satoshi's. I'm not gonna lie.
I hope Higurashi episode 8
Rate my head
ends.
pat.
I hope Higurashi episode 8 ends with Rika head patting the true culprit and then them deciding to not do
Oh
the
my
killings as a
God.
result.
I have to interject here with something actually relevant to the topic because I'm gonna
Okay,
forget
hang
again
on.
if I don't.
Name go.
There's
Wait, good.
there's also the fact that, like, if you read through the arc and, like, pay attention to what's going on instead of listening to what Shion's talking about, she barely knows Satoshi.
No,
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
puts him on
That's
the,
another thing.
she
that was
puts him on the
really relatable.
highest pedestal. And then
Right.
just when she meets Keiichi, basically goes, "You're not as good as him. Like, you don't know anything about him."
And it's
I think this is very interesting because I think her love for Satoshi is very genuine. But yes, she does still put him on a pedestal.
I'm not saying it's not genuine. I'm saying she's in love with the Satoshi who she
Is in her
has
mind.
kind of half invented off of scraps of information from her sister
Mhm.
and, like, the 5 times she met him in person.
it's like she has a husbander. You know, it's like she hasn't
Husband.
had the time to actually get to know Satoshi and what he wants. She just is in love with the idea. of
And I also think that contributes to a lot of her hatred towards Satoko, because she basically invents how Satoshi feels about Satoko
exactly
in her head,
Exactly.
and
If
then
she knew
carries
actually
that
how
on.
Satoshi felt, right? She would be a lot more supportive about Satoko.
Yeah, no, I think
Mm-hmm.
she would. I think she would.
Well,
She
To rephrase
learns
what
that
I-
Satoshi... She learns from Rana that Satoshi is kind of tired of protecting Satoko, but that point, she's already, like, cemented this idea of Satoko being the thing that is hogging Satoshi. So that just further confirms her idea of Satoko should not be here because she is causing Satoshi suffering.
I think she's thinking a lot less of what Satoshi's thinking and thinking more of what she's thinking. Because
Exactly.
she feels that Satoko is deterring Satoshi from her instead of deterring Satoshi from himself.
Yeah, but she...
It's very selfish.
To herself,
this
she
is
paints it as thinking about what Satoshi is feeling.
Right, sure.
I mean, this is part of what makes Shion so interesting to me. Like, she's a very, very flawed character, and coming into the story, she just wants something in her life, and that something ends up being Satoshi.
Well, I think it's a lot more than just coincidence. To rephrase, finally for the nth time, what I want to actually say. Yes, she could have fallen in love with Keiichi, I admit that. If Keiichi came first, and he was there at the right time, then maybe she would have fallen for him.
I reckon she would have.
But I don't think she would go as crazy over Keiichi as she did over Satoshi.
Aspie kept alluding to how the swamp, the mountain explosion, was caused by a heavily foreshadowed element throughout Higurashi's story.
I never really
Something
said
that could
that,
be
but
used.
Sure.
Oh,
Or something that was talked about, something that was discussed, something that could cause a volcano to erupt.
It
So now
wasn't
we just need
Pepe's
to-
bike. It was Oreo's bike.
So now we just need to figure out how Rika managed to head pat a swamp.
Fucking god.
I mean, Rika
If I
does
were
do
a
some
swamp, then
head-patting in
Rika head-patted.
the other chapters.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
head-pats Keiichi a bit.
Yeah.
So obviously that's
what I'm
the
talking
cause
about.
of the disaster. Okay, so now then. I wanted to talk a little bit about Keiichi's role in Higurashi as a whole. Like, we talked about how, like, he kind of sets a mood. But more specifically, how culpable is Keiichi to everything that happens?
He does affect everything that happens, but it's to a point where he couldn't have done anything about it because he doesn't know he's affecting it. He couldn't have known that he was affecting anything. Maybe if he knew that, doing that was dumb and it could have stopped killing, then he wouldn't have done it. But how would he know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, he doesn't know, but, like, that's the thing, right? Keiichi is always, like, trying to do the right thing by people. He is a really nice guy. In Watanagashi, we had this whole saga about, not giving the doll and then wanting to make it up to Mion. And then some shit happened and Shion got involved.
In hindsight, he tried to give the doll to the wrong person 3 times, didn't he?
Oh, God.
He tried his best. It was just like Mion and Shion was kind of like fucking with him. But like, even at the very end, where the torture scene, this was such a magical moment for me because lots of people have criticized Meakashi for making Keiichi out to be someone completely inconsequential and doesn't know what the fuck's going on and just keeps bumbling around like an idiot. I resent that opinion because I think Keiichi...
because it's dumb.
Yeah, Keiichi is very important to this story. We've already explained the whole point about her, Keiichi kind of triggering these feelings in Shion and causing her to commit these murders, right?
I resent that opinion because Keiichi bumbles around like an idiot anyways. Doesn't matter what chapter it is.
Yeah.
But it's not inconsequential. It's important because even though he never correctly guessed who was Shion or Mion, because Shion kind of imposed that on him, like, if you figure it out, I'll give up. But there's no way he possibly could. It's way too convoluted for poor Keiichi to figure out. What's more important there is that Keiichi never stopped believing in his friends and protecting the Mion and Shion in his heart, which was such a touching thing for Shion that she'd never really experienced before, like a genuine ally that would defend her regardless of the circumstances. And I think that's so beautiful. And people are just discrediting the scene way too much because he apparently doesn't get it. That's not true. Keiichi understands something far more fundamental that was able to shift Shion's perspective and make her kind of like rethink everything she's doing.
He doesn't know a thing about Shion, but he still believes she is the killer, and that's what's important.
Yeah.
I feel like saying Keiichi isn't important in Higurashi is almost like saying Kamina isn't important in Gurren Lagann. It's just stupid. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, Keiichi
Like,
has
I
a
can
huge
see-
influence on the people around him that cannot
Yeah.
really be denied.
Are people actually saying that Keiichi is inconsequential in this episode? I haven't seen that anywhere.
Yeah, there was definitely on the forum
Elsewhere.
discussion. There were some people that were just like, yeah.
We've talked
Oh.
about it in my stream that Keiichi is a character who on his own is honestly kind of boring, but when he has other characters to bounce off of, he gets a lot more compelling.
You see, that's where you're wrong, Naomi, because Keiichi ranting about school uniforms could carry a visual novel for, like, a whole route.
Yeah, okay, Nasu. I believe it.
Right. That's actually the most
Keiichi
important
Ruin.
dialogue in the whole.
By
in
the way,
whole
I must
episode.
say, I love the nice touch of the question arc club times soundtrack playing there, even though we don't
Oh,
Oh
hear it
yeah,
anywhere
absolutely.
else.
That was so good. It's
That's
just
my
like it
favorite
really
track in
brought
the entire
everything back
Arsenal.
because, like, yeah, because that was like the only question arc track in the entire game. I think it's just kind of like comes out of nowhere. It's just like, oh shit, Keiichi's back, baby. It's like what I'm saying about how like he brings the mood with him, and when you take Keiichi out of the picture, Higurashi's a completely different story.
Yeah.
It happened in Himatsubushi. It
Yeah.
happened in Meakashi.
I mean, you know, having the volcano not explode is a slightly important detail to Higurashi.
We just
I-
changed the topic.
Speaking of which, the disaster did not happen in this chapter.
Are you
Yeah.
sure?
Yes.
Definitively. The timeline
is-
for it long passes by the
strange.
time the police finish their investigation, and they would not have been able to conduct such an investigation if the area was all fucked up like that.
Fair.
They specifically say they couldn't conduct their investigation in Chapter 3 because of all the volcano stuff. So, we know that something in Chapter 3 caused that, or something in Chapter 2 prevented it. That is also another option if we want to go for silliness.
What about
That is
chapter
still
1?
technically viable. Yeah, exactly. We don't know about Chapter 1 yet.
And this is kind of a really big question that I don't think we have an answer for immediately. Unless Picto's going to throw something out right now.
So
Or
in the
Vyse.
time loop, Rika throws a metaphorical mento into a volcano.
Okay.
I know.
It's
What
the bike.
happened? Yeah, what
Obviously
happened
the
is
bike.
that Shion stole Oreo's bike, so it wasn't Pepe's bike, it was actually Oreo's bike. God fucking damn it. Is this why you're trying to mislead us?
Okay.
I already denied that theory anyway. I'm just making fun.
The problem
Anyway,
is
it
that
sounds like
every way that Aspie tried to debunk the bike before going F you, the bike is fake,
Right?
still applies to everything else I can think of.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go for, oh, by the way, when you throw X number of bodies into the swamp, it goes boom. But I can't say
would
that
be-
because then he'd go, yeah, well, why didn't it go boom already? And also, a very big problem is Keiichi's survival in Chapter 3.
Yeah.
There is no way Keiichi should have survived then unless someone intervened to make it so. Therefore, someone knew that it was going to happen. So it can't just be an accident. Or if it is an accident, someone must have realized it was happening. And that leaves us with very difficult circumstances.
So about that footstep,
I was going to talk about that. Good segue, Karifean. More like pounding in the storehouse. It turns out it's not just a little footstep anymore. That's a fucking bang, bang, bang.
I was honestly starting to think if that simply is actually supernatural. And what I was thinking is, I'm going to go on a little. I'll have to reach out a bit for this one. While I am thinking that there's some kind of time loop, multiverse, whatever thing happening, I am not of the impression that everyone remembers fragments, so I'm seeing that one a little bit different than Picto. And last time I was still thinking, how is this caused? And I was hoping that there's basically science fiction explanation X.
So please explain explanation X.
He doesn't have to. It's a devil's proof.
But now I'm honestly considering if the time loop might actually be caused by an entity called Oyashiro-sama, but that we have a false impression of Oyashiro-sama as well. That is actually a benevolent entity and just tries to prevent this stuff, just mediate, because that is the one thing that we also have from the past legends before the curse happened, that Oyashiro-sama mediated between the humans and the demons.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if...
I'm glad we're looking at the folklore a little bit more, because it's kind of neglected.
So I was wondering if Oyashiro-sama just tries to prevent that over and over and again and just fails.
I think I can see where you're coming from. And
to get to those footsteps, then that would simply be him trying to communicate to people and just people misinterpreting that.
Get the fuck out!
Get out! Your bad things are gonna happen. I don't want you to die.
What comes to
That's
mind there, of
interesting.
course, is when Rika talks to Shion later in the arc about how she's the shrine maiden of Oyashiro-sama, and she's talking to them.
It's like, what? So did you just talk to Oyashiro-sama? Nods head. It's just, what? Rika,
Yeah,
what?
that's kind of my job, actually.
It's my job. One thing I noticed about those footsteps, about the footsteps and the thumping and everything, is that they were very, very childlike. They didn't seem befitting of, if he does exist, of an Oyashiro-sama. Not someone
Clearly,
that calls
all
Sama either.
demons are cute anime girls.
I mean, we are in
Carrie
anime, so
laughing indicates I might have been correct. My god.
I wouldn't be surprised if, she's
Is
a 3,000-year-old
Oyashiro-sama a cute
demon
anime
girl.
girl, Carrie?
What else?
Well, Oyashiro-sama is Rika, so yes.
Oh.
Alright.
Yeah.
So-
Clearly, Oyashiro-sama was like talking with a villager, and the villager said it would be really funny if next time someone walks into the storehouse, you picked one of the... If there's multiple intruders, just pick one at random, and just while they're walking around, just start clapping on their ears over and over again, because they won't be able to see you.
Right.
It'll be really funny, and like they'll have
Right.
a mental breakdown, and we'll be able to laugh about it a bit.
Right.
And that's totally what they were doing. It was just a prank, bro. I just wanted
That
to say
explains
it.
everything, unfortunately, as much as I hate to admit it.
No, it doesn't explain the human talking to Oyashiro-sama part.
Well, it does. They're just having fun.
Okay, in all seriousness, it is slightly irritating to come up with a non-supernatural explanation for people hearing footsteps when no one else around them can hear those footsteps. But I
mean, there
believe
is,
in
though.
I believe in my ability to make one explanation fit any amount of stuff, and square pegs can fit in round holes
Right?
because they are having minor deja vu of the multiple times they have looped through this and looped through these scenarios, and therefore the people who are at a psychological breaking point are hearing extra footsteps, because footsteps are on the right. Yeah, this is kind of reaching, but yeah, that's what I've got. It will all be explained with just the
That's
time.
no less
theory.
supernatural than what Pepe said.
But to be fair, I only have to do one supernatural thing.
I only have to know one supernatural thing.
Can't we just suppose it's like a psychological thing?
Yeah, that's one big possibility.
Shared symptoms? Okay, are there any examples of people hearing the extra footstep before Reina told them about the extra footstep? That's a very important question.
No, yes, that's a big point.
Okay, cool. We can go psychology then, boys. Aspie, you know a bit about psychology.
Sure.
Does it work?
I mean, like, if we have this interpretation that Rena is feeding people this sort of curse of Oyashiro-sama and kind of like perpetuating
Not
that
even
idea.
intentionally.
But maybe that's like something that's perpetuating through the town. Maybe it's not just Rena. Maybe there's other people saying it too.
She really just wants people to be scared of Oyashiro-sama so she can break into the house and steal their cute things. And the reason why...
Gasp.
And the reason why part of the legend is that you can't leave the town is because if you leave the town, you'll take all your cute things with you.
Aside from Counter Shadow Form's point, there is one exception as well. Satoshi himself, because, well, he may or may not have
Do
heard
you
it.
really think that Reina didn't talk with him about it? Even
I think
They said they did.
they did, but only after Satoshi heard it.
No, I think Rena specifically says, oh yeah, I told him he'd hear the footsteps, and he didn't hear them at first, so he didn't believe me, but then he came back to me and he was like,
right.
yeah, I heard the footsteps.
Okay, there we go.
Either that or there's actually people sneaking around, but I guess that doesn't...
Oni Kakashi skips over a lot of the introductory stuff, though. So you could argue that in Oni Kakashi, Reina
not
talks
really.
to him about...
Oni Kakashi is the one that skips at least, because as a reader, we need to be taught everything. And Keiichi's kind of our medium for that. It's like when Keiichi hears about all the
doesn't
curses and
Oishi... Well, wait, does Keiichi hear any extra footsteps before Oishi tells him the thing? Like, Reina's
does he
story
mention the
about her
footsteps?
hearing. Yeah, he does. He mentions, and she kept saying that Oyashiro-sama, there was an extra footstep, and he was standing, and Oyashiro-sama
you
was
might be
standing
right.
by my bed. So...
Oishi's the one who tells him. Alright, okay,
And
it's psychology. There's one thing different about especially Shion, about the whole footsteps deal. If it was psychological, and everyone started hearing the footsteps when they felt that, oh, Oyashiro was out to get me, so I'm hearing footsteps. Shion, when she first heard this footsteps, she didn't think it was Oyashiro-sama. She thought it was Satoshi, and she had no fear whatsoever. She felt warmth. So if it was
But
a
under
psychological
what circumstances
fear,
did that emerge again?
Just after that
She was
incident
in
with
a
Keiichi.
very bad psychological state of despair, and she
Right.
just wanted Satoshi to be there. The curse cropped up in the back of her subconscious, and her brain went, you hear an extra footstep now. And then her conscious mind interpreted that as Satoshi's extra footstep.
Wouldn't they have
Boom.
to connect? I mean, both consciously and subconsciously? I don't know. If you
But like
start
bringing
to
the footstep
consciously
in
think...
without the fear seems kind of illogical to me. Like I feel like
But
the
despair
footstep
is very similar to fear, and she was very much tripping on despair at that moment.
I wonder, because like Satoshi's presence is a hopeful thing. I don't think there's any other
So
instances of the
therefore-
footsteps being a hopeful thing.
That being the case, what of the thumping?
The thumping. Well, it's
Well,
obviously just like
Shion is an unreliable narrator. She was
Oyashiro-chan.
punching herself in the face because she realized how much of an idiot she was being by breaking into the store.
And
storehouse.
wasn't it in
Want
Watanagashi
me to
someone else
bring
heard
up
the
a
thumping?
counterpoint? Yeah. Watanagashi.
Who heard the
What
thumping?
happens there?
In Watanagashi, Shion is like scared and relates to Keiichi what she experienced inside. She plays it off, but Keiichi says there was more behind it, especially since Tomitake also said that he heard some thumping noises from inside.
Everyone was hearing a literal thumping noise, but everyone was too spooked by supernatural things to talk about it, and Takano had earbuds in for some reason.
What about
Didn't mention
Keiichi?
it.
He didn't hear
Keiichi
anything.
didn't hear it.
No, he didn't. So it was just Tomitake and Shion, right?
Yes.
Assuming that Takano not mentioning the sound. Did she mention the sound?
No.
Or did she confirm that she either heard it or didn't hear it? I don't
She
know.
kind of died a little
She
bit too
didn't
fast.
react to it. In any
Alright, so
case.
assuming that her not mentioning the sound means that she didn't hear it, seems like only Tomitake and Shion heard it.
later. I just wanted to like kind of bring this question forward. Just more of a macro perspective. What did you gain from reading Meakashi? I'm going to go around in a circle. So let's start with Naomi.
I mean, I've already read this arc, so... But going into it with a different perspective, like I said before, I found Shion harder to sympathize with this time around. I don't know if it's just because as I've grown as a person, I've gotten less and less patient with people trying to be like, oh, I did this because of this, and then when under pressure going, nah, that actually wasn't the reason, I was just lying to myself to make myself feel better. But, again, it also might be because, as I said, I used to really dislike Satoko. I don't know if I've mentioned that. I used to really, really dislike her. But again, having been through experiences where I met kids who have been through abusive situations, it's harder and harder to dislike her. Because she's characterized as a little shit who does pranks that are way over the top. But she doesn't deserve to have a chair thrown at her. She doesn't deserve to die.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And a lot of kids who go through abusive situations also start acting out in situations where they know they won't be beaten for it. Because, you know, that's kind of how they get it out. And everyone reacts to situations like that differently. But that causes a lot of behavioral problems down the line after it's all over.
Yeah. Interesting you're focusing on Satoko so much since she had a relatively minor role in this.
She had a relatively minor role, but I found... I used to sympathize with Shion more, but, like, the classroom scene was hard for me to watch just because of my new perspective.
I feel like it goes both ways. Like, I can understand where Shion is coming from, but she just went way too far.
I understand where it's a case of I understand where you're coming from, but you need to not do that thing that you're doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. She has a point.
Focusing on Shion more, I reaffirm that she's a character that I can personally relate to in some aspects. Impulse control is hard. It's really hard. But in other aspects, I find myself, like, drifting away from relating to her, because, like, full disclosure, I have had issues in my life of being, like, really impulsive and being really destructive to people around me. And I used to relate to her really hard because of that, but now, when I'm, you know, much further away from that part of my life, it's like, okay, well, this reminds me of myself in a way that I don't like to think about.
Wow, okay, that's heavy. Thanks for sharing that.
No, it's fine. I'm past it, so it's not something that I'm scared to share anymore. I'm not ashamed of it. I worked past it, whatever. But that's kind of what I got out of it. It's still a good arc. I still find her a really compelling character. And she's still my favorite character. I just don't relate to her as much as I used to.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Karifean, what'd you get out of this arc?
Alright, so I guess since Naomi recounted her experience with reading it again, I guess I might as well go back and recount what Meakashi did for me the first time I read it. Which is, Meakashi is really the arc that sold me on Ryukashi's writing in general. To me, it exemplifies his absolute best strengths as a writer in writing a character that is so flawed yet so engaging to read along with. And this is the sort of thing that keeps me coming back to him time and time again. And that's probably in part why Meakashi is my favorite arc, rather than just what it is itself. Like, its sentimental value, but it's something I hold very dear.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. VyseGolbez?
Well, I guess for me it's mostly that it made me think a lot about morality. And also a bit on how we judge people and
I know, like, you brought up that post in the forum about looking at the German law and how much Shion would be punished for her crime.
I basically just used German law as an example just to see how would a what's it called? A court look at that. Well, it's basically that most of the things she did would be seen as murder, and depending on how the country judges murder, some have death sentence, some have, what's the word for being lifelong in jail? I don't know that.
Incarceration.
Life sentence.
No, there's
Yeah. Basically that would basically be the punishment, most likely. Although even Germany is kind of an exception, because she would have to be judged under youth law, and I don't know the specifics for that. Basically, Germany makes a distinction between that person is an adult or that person is still a youth.
Yeah, like, that's another big question, like...
And Shion is young enough
like...
that there wouldn't even be a question asked what law would be enforced. She's definitely a youth, and that's it.
Yeah, in terms of civil ethics, like, most courts would probably argue that she's a child and therefore, you know, is entitled to certain rights and protections that an adult otherwise wouldn't be. And I don't think, like, that's one thing. Yeah, that's one view, but I don't think that's Ryukishi's view. I think Ryukishi is very much of the mind that children and adults are limited only by their experiences. And, you know, I don't think he makes much of a distinction there between child... like how much burden, or what's the word I'm looking for, how much we're willing to blame a child doesn't really factor into it that much. We can like look at a child like Satoko and blame her for relying on her big brother even though she's at such a young age, and maybe that's a bit too far. Sometimes I feel like maybe we're judging Satoko too much for what she did, considering her age, but I don't know.
There is the hard physical aspect of the fact that a child's brain is simply not as developed as an adult's brain. It's just not.
I really like how Ryukishi's able to portray these children, basically, these children and teenagers, as fully independent, reasoning people. And even though Higurashi is definitely a youth-focused story, like, it doesn't downplay that aspect. You know, when we get to stuff like Himatsubushi, it feels different because we're looking at it from an adult perspective. It doesn't devalue the perspective of children as unimportant just because they're young. You know, I think that's really cool. And I just wanted to kind of draw attention to that.
I do think that's an important aspect of it, because even taking into account what I said, kids are a lot smarter than a lot of people give them credit for.
Exactly.
They're a lot more perceptive than a lot of people give them credit for.
So yeah, that's sorry, Vice, to just take that off your point. Did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I was mostly done.
Okay, cool. So Picto, what do you think of Meikashi?
Meakashi really touched me quite a lot for very personal reasons.
Yeah.
I really found myself... Shion is a really weird character to me, because a lot of what she does represents a lot about of what I hate about myself. Especially when you look at her actions through a slightly more critical lens. But it was still really, like, easy to get caught up in this whole narrative she was spinning in her head about, like, how she's going to, you know, stop the people that killed Satoshi or whatever. And, like, you can recognize all the logical leaps she's making and all the conclusions she's jumping to, but at the same time, it all just, like, makes sense.
Yeah, I really was rooting for her for a lot of the chapter.
And, like, it was very...
I see what you're getting at, yeah. If it's too real, that's fine.
It was a bit too real. I enjoyed it quite a lot, but a bit too real.
That was like my second reread of Meikashi. I was like, this is too real.
And that's
I love real.
Yeah, me too. I don't know. I obviously haven't had the same experience as pictoshark, but just the raw emotion from this chapter is just overwhelming. It really portrays the darkest aspects of the human psyche and how it can kind of spin things towards a very, destructive outlook, just depending on how we choose to view things. It kind of goes back to Umineko's philosophy of with love versus without love. And I know someone on the forum brought this up. It's just, I think Ryukishi, this is a theme Ryukishi really likes to hammer in, that people, it's very easy to create demons of people. And in doing so, we can become demons ourselves. And I think that's what Shion realized at the very end, is where she had isolated herself from everyone. She'd incriminated the entire town as her enemy to be destroyed. It's at the very end where she realized, wait a second, I've become the thing I'm trying to destroy, And
I've become a demon.
I've become a demon. And, I think that's really magical. I think Ryukishi is an amazing writer, and I have immense respect for him for conjuring this narrative.
Shion learns the dramatic truth that toast really does taste better if it comes out of a blue toaster.
Damn it, Picto, you had to bring that one in. And so I don't have anything impressive to say that people haven't said already, but Meakashi is really cool, and Ryukishi is a fantastic writer.
My memory might be playing tricks on me, but now it's Pepe's turn, right?
Yes.
It is Pepe's turn.
I have a turn on this?
You do.
Well, now, the most important thing about what Meakashi did for me is it made me rethink the entire series. It made me remember what I loved about Higurashi. I mean, it made me remember why I got so hooked into episode 1 compared to all the other visual novels I've read. And I believe that somewhere along the line, probably during episode 3, is when it really peaked, and I got too absorbed in trying to figure out the truth, the quote-unquote truth. Maybe because I had this inkling that I was right, or maybe I was just being challenged by my peers, I don't know. But that's one thing that Meakashi made me realize, is that, these characters are given to us in the light that, in a fun light, in a very easygoing light. Ryukishi writes these characters to become our friends, and he reverses it so well, to the point that we start doubting whether these characters really are our friends or not, especially in Onikakushi, which is very important. And I think that Meakashi makes us remember that these characters are our friends, and if we were in the same situation, if our friends were the ones being, if we're the ones being suspected for murder, would we be able to look at them as murderers, or would we want to protect this notion that we have of them? I mean, I know it's naive. They could be murderers and they could be betraying us this whole time, but I think thinking about people like that on a regular basis is unhealthy. Thinking that they could be betraying you at any time is very unhealthy, and you have to build up this. Yes, as you all know. So you have to build up this trust. I mean, that's what keeps people alive. To have a more cheesy term for it, the love between people. That's what keeps us alive. That's what keeps our social connections healthy. And that's what Meakashi made me realize. Not everybody is a connection of, possibilities, of probabilities, and their actions are not probabilities. They are people that we get to learn, that we trust. Some people we trust, some people we don't. And in order to keep our social relationships healthy, in order to keep ourselves healthy, in order to not go down into the spiral of madness that we have been shown so many times, we have to protect these people who are close to us in our hearts. Yes, that is what I got.
Well said, Pepe. And I believe that's why Keiichi is such an important protagonist and character. Right. Because he really exemplifies all, like in Onikakushi, exactly what goes wrong when you doubt your friends, but then again in Watanagashi, what can come of actually starting to believe in your friends despite everything. It's quite a turnaround, I feel.
It doesn't even have to be murder. That if someone tells you that your friend did something like not even
Right.
horrible, just kind of bad.
Hey, your friend stole your cookie.
Or more like, hey, your friend like mistreated this person, was really rude to them.
Right.
I mean, I have trust issues, so I'd probably believe them if I looked into it and found it to be supported, but no.
I mean, that's one thing that you get from, I guess, growing up in a world where it's dangerous to trust people too much. But
Yep.
I think stopping and reading stories like this makes us remember that the world isn't all like that.
Of
And,
course.
you know, having all these trust issues can get to a point where we trust no one. And
But there is an
thus-
important thing to make here, Pepe, is that Shion did do horrible things, even if Keiichi did believe in
Yeah.
her.
That's also
She still
true.
did these horrible things. But the believing still has value, because it
Yes.
showed Shion that she wasn't alone in the world, and that even if she had committed these horrible crimes, there were still people out there that were her allies. Even if it was
Yes.
too late, it's still important to believe in your friends,
I
because
mean-
who knows, maybe that sort of belief will help pave the way to a better future. You know what I mean?
It's
I
not-
mean, it saved him from hand-based torture, so I think that's pretty worth it.
Yeah, it's stopped him from being tortured.
It's a lot less about trusting like what your friends do, that they're not fucking murderers, but trusting that they are who you think they are. You know? Especially if it's someone who you spent, well, in this case, Keiichi only spent months with them, but maybe for people who you spent years with, if they do end up becoming murderers, would you just call the police on them and then just throw them to jail and forget about it, or would you try to help them? I think Keiichi is the perfect example of, even if he does find out that, hey, you're a murderer, he would try to help them. He would pacify. He would find out what's making them do that and try to remove that, you know? At least not in Onikakushi.
Well, I think that's probably the perfect way to end this podcast. I couldn't ask for a better ending than that. We still have some housekeeping to do, but that is very good, Pepe. I'm very thankful to have you on this podcast. On that note, I've decided to award you the MVP for discussion of this podcast.
Yada yada.
Congratulations, Pepe.
Yay.
Our top poster. Yeah.
How?
I'll be sure
People
to
are
get a prize
sleeping
to you.
upstairs. I am not clapping.
That's
Thank
fine.
you guys.
So yeah, thank you so much, Pepe. I really appreciate your insight, because I feel like there is a certain truth there where we can get too focused on solving the mystery, and sometimes the so-called heart of the mystery, the heart of the people involved in these circumstances, becomes lost in everything. So it's important to step back from Higurashi as a puzzle and start looking at it as a group of people and motives and
Right.
feelings. And I don't know, I'm getting really cheesy right now, but I very much appreciate your impact there. It's pretty fundamental that we don't forget that. As much as I say that, I
One thing
still
that
want
I
to
will
focus
always
on
push
solving
in
the
any
mystery.
story. Well,
Yeah.
of course, but
You got to keep that balance, you know. We're seeking the truth, but we can't forget something important in that process. So, let's take a look at this character poll. Karifean, do you want to take us through the results?
Our top 4 characters, where everyone gives a vote for the 4 characters they like the most. We have Rena topping the list with 12 out of 18 votes.
What a surprise.
how?
She was already topping the list last chapter, so this doesn't come as too much of a surprise. Then we have Rika.
Just such a distinct character. Anyway.
Yeah. Then we have Rika with 10 votes. Well, that's pretty much in line with last chapter as well. But then we have Shion, who was pretty low in the last rankings, but now she's the number 3 most popular character.
Yay!
Which I'm very happy for, because she's my favorite character.
Then we have our favorite club member poll. Ren is topping that with
What a
Neon's-
surprise.
Mion second, actually.
Me on second, interestingly enough, and Rika in third.
Then again, the Mion vote can be interpreted as people who liked Shion just wanting to vote for her sister, because Shion obviously isn't a club member, so she isn't on this ranking.
Favorite adult, Takano won this by quite a bit. And then
Yeah.
Yeah, and Irie got second, which surprises me even more, because he didn't really get any votes in the top 4.
Well,
Oishi
people
is
either
third.
really like him or don't like him that much. Well, he did get a lot
And
of screen
Oishi-
time this chapter.
And then we have favorite househead. It wasn't really much of a surprise, but Rika won this out. Audio got 4 votes, though. That's 20%.
She put up a fight.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like as long as you can kind of, like, consider empathizing with her after that last tip and stuff, maybe she's not so bad.
And then
And
there's
Kimiyoshi
that
got
one
one
troll that voted for Kimiyoshi.
No, I was genuinely going to vote for Kimiyoshi anyway. Shut up.
Okay.
You want to talk about that briefly, Picto?
Kimiyoshi is really interesting for reasons that have already been covered in this podcast, because he's a very interesting, much more direct look into the whole people putting on an act thing. Like, Oryu, it's like much more obviously overt and much more easier to relate to. Like, oh, I have to say I hate my daughter, but I actually don't. But Kimiyoshi is a much more interesting situation, I suppose I'd say. With him, like, having to really, like, play up the whole Shion thing for the crowd.
I really wonder how much he actually, like, condemns Satoshi and Satoko, though. Like, how much of that
I disagree, because, like, he was in a pretty private situation at that point.
You think he genuinely feels that way?
I think that, like, that's another point towards him. It's, like, very, like, interesting to see, like, how, sure, some of it is an act, but some of it, like, everyone else just influences you, you know?
It's entirely possible that he does condemn Satoshi and Satoko because he, if we remember, he is one of the older people of the village. He is very heavily ingrained in this whole religious thing, and if him and everyone around him are basically indoctrinated to believe we need to beat up the enemies of the village or Yoshiro-sama will get mad, I think he'd do it maybe just out of fear.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so the cat box remains closed, and we're welcome to speculate on, you know, his motives there, but it's very interesting. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about the fan art that we got, or the fan works that we got going for this tea party. I really tried to rally support for this one because it's an important chapter for a lot of people, and we got a pretty decent turnout. LTEXLT produced some fan music, interestingly enough. One of them happened to be a electronic remix of You mixed with Naruku no Hana, which was really interesting. And that was really cool. We also had mysterious Masked the Saito dropped by in the forum and made this awesome fan art of Shion, which just came out of nowhere, and then they returned to the darkness. I'll let people speculate who that really is.
But you totally know.
I totally know. And then the Hoenn Hippo posted this mildly disturbing fan art of Higurashi. I don't know what it was going for. It kind of feels like a Casey and Friends kind of take on Meakashi. Just like the 4Kids version, where they're all holding hands surrounded by the freaking, you know, torture table. It's very interesting.
Interesting.
And last but not least, we also received this wonderful fan art of Satoko and Satoshi from Artie FedEx. I'm in love with this art, and not only that, but Artie FedEx also contributed his voice to the U chorus. Given all that, we've decided to commend Artie FedEx as our top creator for the Meakashi Tea Party. Congratulations, man, you've earned it. That pretty much wraps up the Meakashi Tea Party. Thank you so much for joining. This podcast has been wonderful. The forum discussion really went some interesting places, and I'm so proud of you guys for finally coming together for this wonderful chapter. I've enjoyed this tea party immensely. I can't thank you enough.
It was a good one. Thanks,
I
Aspie.
will just have to surpass it for Tsumi Horoboshi, the Atonement chapter.
Yeah. Tsumi Horoboshi is a favorite of mine. I really like this chapter, and I don't know how long it's going to be. Notably, this Tea Party commemorates the very first time that Rokkenjima has been up to date with the Steam releases. So, yay guys, we did it! When Sumihorobashi
Finally!
when Sumihorobashi releases on Steam, we'll be able to cover that when it comes out, and it's hopefully we can actually keep up with the hype this time. I'm very excited to get into that. Who knows when that will be? Maybe it'll be really soon, maybe it won't. It's kind of hard to tell, but however, before we get to Sumihorobashi, there is one more thing. As of the time of recording, we've actually already started our next tea party, which is for Some Utsushi. Some of you may have never heard of this before, and that's fine. This is a console-exclusive arc released on, I think it was either the PS2 or PS3 version first. And basically what this might even be DS, I don't know, it was a console. And basically this arc tells a completely independent side story. It follows the perspective of a girl who used to live in Okinomiya with ties to Hinamizawa and then moved to the city. And so it's kind of giving us this whole new cast of characters and examining the influence basically Hinamizawa has on the outside world and of people who, you know, are leaving Hinamizawa. And it kind of brings Higurashi to an urban setting. And it's really interesting. For people maybe familiar with this plot from the manga arc Onisarashi, it's kind of like has similar elements, but the console version is a little bit different. It has a different ending and a bunch of other stuff. So it will still be fresh in a lot of people's minds. If you're new to this chapter and if you're interested in joining us, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's actually been made available in English for the very first time as part of the 07th mod, which is this project you may have heard of on GitHub. You can Google it, 07th mod, 07th modding. It's fully available as a patch which you can then apply to your installation of Himatsubushi on Steam. And
Chapter 4, that is.
yeah, Chapter 4. And so we're doing a tea party on it, and that's lasting for another week, maybe a little bit more, depending on if we can get everyone in time or not. But I would really encourage you guys to get on board for that, because I've already finished it, and I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to discussing with you all, so please join in for that too. So yeah, thank you once more for joining us for the Meakashi Tea Party, and I look forward to having you all again for future podcasts. Did you guys enjoy this?
I enjoyed
Hell
it, but
yeah.
now I have to go back to my
Yes,
groundhog hole
definitely.
and pretend I'm dead until until Minagoroshi, then I'll come out.
I thought it was great to have you on for this one, Naomi. You did well. First podcast.
Thank you.
Didn't even break a sweat. Awesome podcast, guys. Probably the best one yet. I can't wait to see what we come up with for future podcasts. So until then, take care, guys, and thanks for listening, everybody. Goodbye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye!
Bye.
あなたは今どこで何をしていますかこの空の続く場所にいますか今まで私の心を埋めていたもの失って初めて気づいたこんなにも私を支えてくれていたことこんなにも笑顔をくれていたこと失ってしまった対象はとてつもなく大きすぎて取り戻そうと必死に手を伸ばしてもがくけれどまるで風のようにすり抜けて届きそうで届かない孤独と絶望に胸を締め付けられ心が壊れそうになるけれど思い出に残るあなたの笑顔が私をいつも励 一度あの頃に戻ろう今度はきっと大丈夫いつもそばで笑っていようあなたのすぐそばであなたは今どこで何をしていますかこの空の続く場所にいますかいつものように笑顔でいてくれますか今はただそれを願い続ける